Hello, this is Joseph Gillette Sr. with GlobalIntelHub.com, an intelligence blog. The focus on leading alternative intelligence, which is not being covered by the mainstream narrative. We wrote an article, The Deep Underground State, which is published on Zero Hedge, and we wanted to do a follow-up video which kind of just digs into the essence of what this is, and we want to build out our video blog as well, as doing the podcast on a regular basis is difficult, as you have issues with getting high quality guests and so on. So we're going to do regular intelligence updates, which I can just do freely based on breaking stories and interesting things that are going on. Now, let's first dive into the essence of the article. So there's a small amount of group of people who control the financial system. And there's a good book about this, The Committee of 300. And in the book, it basically says that there's a committee of 300 people that, at least for, what year is it, 2024, since the 1600s, early 1700s, there's a group of 300 people that meet. It's connected to, if you want to look into who it is, the Dutch East India Company and those group of people. They were British, but they were also other. It was Dutch. It was a group that got together in order to create basically the world's first corporation in a modern sense, that they could go to India. And it was colonialism and corporatism, and that's the monopoly capitalism that we use today. And those people didn't change. That's the whole thesis of this book. And Dr. John Coleman, who wrote the book, he worked with, or for, however you want to say it, the CIA, MI6. This was a really serious guy. He's not alive today, but he wrote this. He was talking about it publicly in the 1990s, and there's lots of videos of him going on about this. But anybody in the financial business from Wall Street is going to tell you that that's basically true. You've got a small amount of groups, and we're talking really small, like 20, 30 funds, that are the shareholders for almost everything. So when you peel back the layers, Warren Buffett might be a little bit of an exception to that rule, but mostly it's the same institutional shareholders that own everything, and there's no records of who owns them. In other words, the banks own the Federal Reserve Bank, but who owns the Bank of International Settlements? It's not a non-profit. It's owned. It's a private corporation. It's a private bank. So there's a group of people who owns all these assets, like they say about how the royal family owns all the real estate, like the Crown owns Canada. And I can tell you, I lived in New Zealand for 3 years, and when you buy property, you sign an agreement. It's freehold. And I'm not an expert in New Zealand real estate, but it wasn't just where I was. I knew other people that had similar agreements, and I lived in Christchurch, but this was like this in Auckland and other places where you're basically leasing your ground on a 99-year lease, which you can renew indefinitely. But the point is, you don't actually own the land. And anything you want to do, you want to dig, you want to do this, that, you have to get the permission of the Crown, which is the royal entity, like the trust fund of the royal family. So the interesting thing that I found is, well, let's start with this. They control the currency, so we all know that. This is a chart of the purchasing power of one British pound from 1209 to 2019. And this is the same chart of every currency. It's introduced, it goes to zero. That's the same chart for every currency. But what I thought was interesting, and this is something I've had a thread going with a friend and a couple people for a long time, and I'm always interested in caves and tunnels, first of all. But since I've been a child, I've been just fascinated with why. So in the 1960s, the government spent billions of dollars building massive underground infrastructure. Why? They said it was to protect us from the Russians, and then recently we've learned that there was never a threat from the Russians. So why did they do it? Was it because they wanted to create a nuclear war on the surface and live under there? That's one explanation. But then why are all the state capitals connected to these underground tunnel systems? Why do they spend so much money and effort on all of this underground infrastructure? So let's take a couple of looks at these pictures. And these are all public projects. So in many cases, you can go on tours in some of these tunnel systems, and here's a beautiful one where a tunnel actually opens to a altar or some kind of Catholic altar worship center. Let's take a look at the Greenbrier. I pulled up some images of this. Is a good picture. You can see on top, this is the hotel, and underground is this bunker structure. And this bunker goes to Washington, D.C. So let's open a map. And we just get directions to Washington, D.C., and you can see that it's really far. So it's a 4-hour drive. It's 300 miles. So there's tunnels that go from this resort in West Virginia to Washington, D.C. That's public. The reality is there's tunnels all over the United States and all over the world connecting these sites. Why? Why are the elite so obsessed with tunnels and bunkers and tunnel systems and digging and digging and digging? It's like a fetish or an obsession, but it's a very expensive one. So you got to think, I mean, these billionaires especially, and the people who control the system, they're not for money. I mean, they obviously have so much money that they're not for money making, like in a business sense, but they're very greedy, and they're definitely not wasting money. I mean, they're not interested in burning their money. So why would they spend, if we look at today's dollars, trillions of dollars building all this underground infrastructure? So the Greenbrier is just one example that's gone public, but there are tons of other examples that are still private. And what's interesting, just today as I wrote this article, I saw this on LinkedIn. This is in Tokyo, and this is a 4.5 kilometer long tunnel. Look at this. It's a drainage tunnel, but anyway. There's just tunnels everywhere. And look how big this is. It's massive projects. And you can be on top of the street and never even know that it's there. So, here's some other images. Tunnel systems. And you can find all these. The purpose here is not to explore what's out there on the internet, but the point is, why did I see this in the Denver airport? Look at this guy. He's some kind of hell demon in your suitcase. It's almost like they're spell casting, that the elite are living underground like ants, or that's connected to some kind of dark power or some beings that live down there. I don't know. We don't know. I'm not saying I know the fact. What I'm saying is it's weird that they have all this subterranean infrastructure and the people on the surface are not allowed in. And I know some people who have went down there, either both government people and private people, and there's some facilities that are open to the public that you can go down and see. But the question is, why are they doing this? So we can only speculate. I'm not sure why. And at the end of this article, I put some really good videos, which are hour-long each, in-depth, 2 controversial, deep research, and 3 mainstream. One from the History Channel, another from the Military Times. They're now training soldiers to fight in tunnels, and we're talking lots of soldiers. So this program is not just one unit, it's a big project. And then some other...
Can you describe... They had a barbershop in there with one chair?
It's got massive reservoirs, generators, even a crematorium if needed, post office, medical facilities, and emergency command and communication links to the U.S. military all around the world.
So one last thing before we end this. You see these maps, and we don't know... There's no way to verify these maps because we're not allowed in the facilities, but One thing that's interesting, and this one of the videos in the article, is a guy named Gene Decode who was in the U.S. Navy. That's a pseudonym. We don't know what his real name is, and that's good for his protection. Has said you can look at seismograph information about earthquakes in correlation to deep underground military installations, as far as he says, in his opinion, there's a white hat group who is attacking some of the facilities where dark things and bad things happen. And there's other ways to verify this information other than just witness testimony of people who've been down there or physically going down ourselves, because we wouldn't be allowed and we wouldn't necessarily want to go down there. I mean, if you could sneak into one of these places, you probably might not come back, so I'm not suggesting anybody do that. But there are other ways to look at verifying this information, especially these maps, other than ground penetrating radar. And the easiest way is public projects. A lot of these projects are very public. This is a Hyperloop project by Elon Musk. Richard Branson was doing something similar, and it doesn't matter to pin this on Branson or Musk. That's not the point. The point is that there are reports that this technology has existed in the military for a very long time. Now they're commercializing it. So that's a real photo of a real thing. This is an animation. That's a design. That's the Branson project, the Virgin. This technology is old hat. Basically, you create a vacuum, and we have drilling technology. Let me pull that up. Okay, here are some examples of the tunnel boring machines. This has all the flags on it. That's a known thing. It's not very secret, but there are companies that build these things, and this doesn't cut rock. It basically melts the rock. And vitrification is when the rock becomes like glass. So you have a tube which is almost perfectly sealed like glass. You suck the air out, and all of a sudden you have a vacuum. So you don't need maglev, you don't need magnets. They might use that too. We don't know how this technology works, but the idea is that creating a vacuum with these machines would not be difficult. This is not advanced technology. It's not nearly as advanced as some of the things that we publicly know about. It's very kind of crude technology. It's something that we've had since the 1960s. This one's called Big Bertha. It's an $80 million drill, and this is a public thing. That technology is from a long time ago, so what they have now is probably even more advanced, but the point is that it would not be hard to imagine a world where you have tunnels being bored in the deep underground going from Los Angeles to New York. And this is what it looks like. It's not hard to imagine that this is real because it's old technology. So this is something that is very interesting to explore, and at the end of the day, that maybe the deep state is deep underground, and that's why it's called the deep state. It's not a metaphor about the shadow government, because the shadow government is something that's the administrative state. Those are people who we may know. They may be our neighbors, people who work for DHS or FEMA or other agencies. Maybe the deep state is a group of people or beings that physically live underground, and they're controlling things from down there. And we don't know too much about it because we're not allowed down there. So hopefully we'll get some access and we'll be able to get some answers. But for now, this is just connecting the dots as far as what is the deep state and understanding why they have all of this underground infrastructure. Maybe that's where their base of operations is, and maybe that's why they're not afraid. A lot of people say, well, why are they so brazen to put their stuff out there and tell the truth about the different control systems or the vaccine or things like this? Well, maybe it's because they don't care, number one, and they have an ego trip and they're high on adrenochrome. But number two, maybe they have their escape very easy. They press a button, go 50 floors below, and then they can access tunnels and go to China or wherever. Go back to the rock that they crawled out from, as we say. But anyway, look into the public infrastructure, for example, under the state capitals. Let's just pull up one last thing and then we'll end this. Well, I was in Nashville recently, and here's a picture of it. And there's other tunnel systems. It's called the Cordell Hull Capital Connector. And there's even offices down there. So you have this whole world, and there's something like this in DC. You can go around DC, and they have these little golf carts. I know people who have been down there, and I've seen some pictures too. It's not so secret. A lot of the tunnel systems are not so secret. But what are they doing down there, and why is there such infrastructure underground? Thank you. This is a video about the deep underground state, and this is the article. You can find it at globalintelhub.com. We'll put the link in the description. We appreciate your support. We cannot advertise these videos because we are blacklisted by Google. So we appreciate you sharing this with people, because we can't advertise this even if we wanted to. We couldn't take out even if we had millions of dollars to promote this, we couldn't take out a front page newspaper article in the New York Times or any newspaper talking about this, even if we were just promoting it just for fun. It's not allowed. So we appreciate you sharing and subscribing, and especially sharing it with normie friends, but sharing it with anyone is greatly appreciated. Thank you, and we'll see you in the next video.